How's it going? Today we're going to talk about food chains, food webs, and a little bit of symbiosis. What is a food chain? A food chain is essentially a sequence of organisms, each of which uses the next lower member of the sequence as a food source. So in a food chain, each organism obtains the energy from the level below it. Plants are generally called producers because they create their own food through photosynthesis or a process called chemosynthesis. Photosynthesis is using light energy to create sugars, and chemosynthesis is using select chemicals to do the same. Animals are consumers because they cannot create their own food. They must eat plants or other animals to get the energy that they need. Let me move the box out of the way here so you can reread that. And now I'll move it back down so that we can continue moving. Okay. Oh, sorry. Primary producers are organisms that are capable of producing their own food, like we said in the previous slide. We can also say that they are photosynthetic or use light energy, or chemosynthetic, once again, using chemical energy. Examples of these types of organisms are primary producers include things like algae, phytoplankton, plants. Most things that are green, you're going to see undergo photosynthesis. Primary producers are also eaten by primary consumers, and we generally refer to those as herbivores. Okay, we'll be highlighting some of the animals and plants in marshlands, and so you can see some of the primary producers here and how a marshland ecosystem relates to that. Some of the ones you see here are cattails, certain flowers, and certain shrubberies. This one down here is a marsh fern. I can tell that it's covered up here. Okay, here are the four types of consumers. I would add a fifth category that resembles the detrivore but is slightly different. Herbivores, animals that eat only plants. Carnivores, animals that eat only meat. Omnivores, like yourself, animals that eat animals and plants. And then detrivores, I would also consider another name for detrivores to be decomposers, essentially animals that eat dead materials and organic waste. And then there's scavengers, which are animals that kind of steal other people's food and eat dead things as well. So they kind of fall into the same category as detrivores, but they're a little bit different. There are other ways to classify consumers. We have primary, secondary, tertiary, and we can even go up to quaternary consumers depending on how big that food chain is. And you can see the level of classifications here beside those. Primary meaning first, secondary meaning second, tertiary meaning third, and quaternary meaning fourth. And here are some of the primary consumers in marshes. Like I said, we'd be highlighting some of the animals in marshlands. You can see a muskrat here, the wood duck, the grasshopper. There are several types of snakes in marshlands. There are sparrows and birds of prey as well. Here is a raccoon, which does the same thing. And the detrivore or the decomposer, like the worm. A food web is an interlocking pattern of food chains, generally represents all of the food chains that are present in an ecosystem. All right, now we're going to move on to symbiosis. Our goal in this is to answer just a couple questions here. What is symbiosis? What are the different kinds of symbiosis? And what are some examples of symbiosis? Essentially, what is it? It is the act of living together. What it means, two organisms that live together, either temporarily or for a long period of time, and at least one of the organisms benefits from the relationship between the two. The different kinds of symbiosis, we have mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. In mutualism, both organisms will benefit from the relationship. Commensalism, one organism benefits while the other really isn't affected that much. Let me move this out of the way. And parasitism is one organism benefits and one organism is harmed in the relationship. So there are three levels, and we're going to identify that with a couple pictures here. Mutualism, both organisms benefit. Both organisms are happy. Commensalism, one organism really isn't affected, and the other is happy. And then parasitism, one organism is harmed, one organism is benefited. Here are some examples. We can say that an acacia tree and plants and ants can be considered parasitism due to what the ants are doing here. This one's actually debatable. Some people see it as a mutualistic relationship now. We'll talk more about that in class. You have the sea anemone and the clownfish. Everybody knows this one from Finding Nemo, and this is generally a mutualistic relationship. The boxer crab and anemones, same deal here. You can continue reading to help yourself. A shark and remora, this is a big one of commensalism. Okay, emperorship and the sea cucumber, one is benefited, the other is unaffected. The moray eel and the cleaner fish, both are benefited from the relationship. Here you can see commensalism. This one is not a good example, so we're going to move on from there. Antelope and the oxbird, another example of mutualism. Here we see some examples of parasitism. If you remember our unit from waterborne diseases, you'll remember this one. Also, another example of mutualism here. And so let's review. What is symbiosis? It is a relationship between two organisms, different kinds: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. And one example of each, you see the clownfish and the sea anemone as mutualism, the shark and remora as commensalism, and any sort of parasite. How about let's go with a tick and a dog for parasitism. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you.